The Steerage is art history's really first modern photograph, and Alfred Stieglitz is considered to be the first modern photographer. Contextually, let's just kind of get right into it. This is it's not necessarily the era. Era, you can also call him like early 20th century photography, but you can also discuss it as part of the photo secession movement, which is the idea that photography is the result of not just pointing your camera at something and recording what you see in front of you, but it is the result of manipulation of the photographer and the choices he or she makes and some of the things with the camera that the photographer chooses to do, or the lighting conditions, and so on. So the photo secession movement really is about photography being a complete fine art where the photographer is the artist making choices, and like painting or sculpture. And so Stieglitz is really the head of that movement, wanting photography to be taken as seriously as painting. And not only was he really his own great artist in that, but he supported other photographers as well and held exhibitions. He worked hard to publish other photographers' works and had his own magazines, which I have a picture of on the lower right, his magazine called Camera Work. And one way that Stieglitz kind of coined a term called straight photography, where photography is a truthful take on the real world. And that will be, I think, more clear when we look at the steerage photograph in more detail. And when he takes the photo, he is sailing with his family to Europe, and since he is wealthier and of higher status, he is a part of the first class and kind of in the upper parts of the ship. And one day he's walking around and he comes across then an area known as kind of a glimpse, really, into what's the third class, or really the steerage class of passengers. And that is usually immigrants and people who are trying to get a better life, but they can't afford this long journey in any other class of tickets, so they are forced to stay with the cargo and with the mechanics of the ship. It's hot. There's no luxury at all, and it's crowded. And so when he takes this picture, it is a photo that shows not only the possibilities of photography in terms of an art form, it's also a comment on the real world with its socioeconomic differences and also gender differences, which I'll highlight then when we get to the photograph too. When he took the photo, he couldn't develop it right away. And when he did develop it, he didn't publish it for a long time. In fact, the place where he did end up publishing it was on the cover of his own magazine, again, which you're seeing here, called Camera Work. It became the cover image probably about 4 years later, after he took the photograph in 1907. And since he's focusing so much in this image and in his other works on shapes, objects, their relationship to each other, and that Pablo Picasso, who we're going to have coming up very soon, said that he and Stieglitz were, and this is a quote of his, working in the same spirit. So you see kind of the embracing of photography here by a painter, and not only is he just embracing photography, but he's embracing the approach that Stieglitz takes, finding a kind of a similar mind and creative eye. And once we do Picasso, I think you'll truly see that the connections between the two of them. So content, there's not a ton to have to talk about. I've already gone over what the steerage is, which I definitely think you should know as a term, since the painting is called steerage. But if you just look at the image, don't even look at the words that I've written on the slide, just look at it, and you just start to see these really interesting shapes, lines, textures, the value or light dark contrast. It's like this photograph is the perfect display of the formal qualities of art. And when Stieglitz was walking on the ship and came across this scene, he did not have his camera. And he saw the straw hat that I'm pointing to, that straw hat being circular and in this kind of sea up on top of the darker colors of the men's suits and other hats, it really stood out and grabbed his attention. So he booked his way over to his cabin, got his camera. I can imagine him just like praying that the scene was still there and the man was in that same position with the hat so fully displayed, and then just took the picture. This frame, this image that he saw with the guy's hat facing down, and then the steam stack, that cylindrical tube that is slightly tilted to the left on the upper left hand part of the image, and then the bridge and the kind of ladder going across, or the bridge going across with the chains, great texture, but that contrasting then diagonal line, the lighter values of the women on the bottom with the steerage, and the ladder in the right hand side, just that other diagonal line, just cropped. The men on the top, separated from most of the women who are on the bottom doing laundry. Now that's that separation really of the sexes and what they're expected to do or not do. And so I like this quote he said. It said, "I saw shapes related to each other. I was inspired by a picture of shapes and underlying that, the feeling I had about life." So I think this photograph, not only being a display of class, like socioeconomic classes, where you have Stieglitz being a first class passenger, taking an image of the steerage passengers, the crowded nature of it, the women down below, and this feeling of being kind of trapped, contained, a little bit claustrophobic there, being kind of tucked in. Um, with gender differences, with the males on the top part, the women down on the bottom for the most part. And then, add that to then these just perfect and plentiful kind of exploration of shapes, lines, value, texture, patterns, emphasis, unity of these shapes and lines. It's just this beautiful moment of marriage between subject and composition, and just a brilliant eye that Stieglitz had for this moment. And this is the only picture he took of it. He just had the one glass plate from his room, took the picture, and didn't even know what he had until a week later. And still, I think, was kind of uncertain about it, perhaps. And then here are just some other ones that you see, some photographs. One of New York City, another one of an image in Venice, which is lower left-hand corner. I actually love the picture in the upper right with the fruit and the gable of the house. And then the other two pictures, the one on the lower right is Stieglitz with his wife, Georgia O'Keeffe, who is another famous artist, a painter, more of an abstract painter from the Southwest. She's probably known more for her like paintings of abstract flowers. And that's a famous photograph he's done of Georgia in the upper left-hand corner. So I would say for function and formal qualities, I mean, my goodness, take your pick. I guess I would probably focus on shape, since it is the item that got his attention initially. But any form of unity, with the unity of the shapes and lines, that kind of balance of also of the shapes and lines. You've got diagonals in all directions. So I think any number of those things would work. Shapes, if you're going to say shape, I would just say, the geometric shapes, that the plentiful amount of geometric shapes here, as the dominant focus and the varied amount of them, and how that grabs your attention. You could do that, I'm sure. And for function here, one is social commentary. In fact, I think that's a big part of it, capturing this moment during the early 20th century of immigrants traveling and the poor conditions that they traveled in. And then also aesthetic. And the aesthetic is using photography as a fine art to capture and create this beautiful composition that can communicate so much in terms of meaning about life, and also as good as any painting in terms of composition, about how he framed this, about the things he's focusing in on. The eye of Stieglitz that saw a moment here that was beautiful in both composition and in message. So those are the two things I would use here for Stieglitz. I mean, you could also kind of slip in there for function, like historical, because this is, documenting history as well with that. So again, that is our first modern photographer, one of the most important photographers in the history of art, really ushering in the beginnings of this great photography movement of the 20th century. And also, I think, in a way, a lead into what's coming up, which is the Cubist movement with the focus on shape.